Stratford-upon-Avon lies at the very heart of England. It's been home to playwrights and poets and plays host to travellers from all over the world. It's become the town most tourists want to visit. Hundreds of thousands do every year, either to soak up the culture or just have a fun day out on the river. There's a host of monuments too, mostly to some Elizabethan playwright called William Shakespeare. It was once said of Stratford-upon-Avon that the mind refuses to dwell on anything that isn't connected with William Shakespeare. And it's true. You wouldn't have to go very far before finding something to do with the bard or his works. But you know, Stratford was well established in its own right a long time before Shakespeare made it famous. And there's a lot more here to see than old Will. So let's leave him up on his plinth just for the moment and go and find out what else the town has to offer. It all began way back in the Bronze Age. People began settling here because, thanks to the River Avon, it had the makings of a good trading centre. In fact, the town took its name from the Avon, Strat being the Roman road which fords the river along here. It may be hard to believe looking at it now, but this whole area, part of the Bancroft Gardens, was once a waterfront crammed with small industries and barges carrying heavy goods like timber and coal on their way from Bristol to Birmingham. There was another reason why Stratford grew and prospered as a town. Because of its excellent location, it was the ideal place to hold a market. Since the 1400s, farmers have been coming here to buy and sell their stock, but in those days it was more of a social occasion. Everybody came to town on market day. They came to gossip, tell stories, have a few drinks. They could be entertained. There were travelling minstrels and acrobats, and of course there were plenty of traditional buxom ladies selling hot pies and ale. Sadly for some, you won't find many of those here today. But the faces which remain have probably changed very little in character over the years, and the farmers have the same interest as always, getting the best deal. Now you might think this is the real Stratford, a long way from the tourist track, and you'd be quite wrong. Stockman Bill Coates.
It's of great interest to the visiting Americans and Australians who are interested and involved in agriculture in their own countries. And it's surprising how many of them do arrive and just walk around, and you can pick them out very easily. They're dressed in the right sort of hat and that sort of thing. And they bring their wives and their families into Stratford on holiday, and they leave their wives behind in the town and come up here and have a wonderful time looking round and enjoying themselves and learning as well, I think. And they come in considerable numbers.
This market is on the outskirts of Stratford, but for years it was held in the town centre, with occasional alarming consequences.
A barren cow got out of the pen and ran up onto the road. It was sort of uphill onto the main road by the Gower Memorial. And along came a very old bull-nosed Morris van, and it ran slap into the cow, which was unfortunate for the cow. But it was even more unfortunate for the van because it completely fell to pieces. All the mud wings came off, the two mud wings at the front, both the headlamps, and one of the back mud wings as well. And the driver, who I don't know who he was, but he didn't seem the slightest upset. And he just opened the back door, picked up all the bits and put them in the back and drove off.
What happened to the cow?
Well, the cow did a somersault, but and went a trot round the Bancroft Gardens, but we soon caught that and put it back in the market.
A livestock auction is no place for a novice. It's great fun to watch, but if you cough or twiddle your finger, you could go home towing a prize bull. Just stand well back and watch the experts. This pseudo-Gothic fountain, built 100 years ago, is part of Stratford's American connection. It was a gift from a Shakespeare mad millionaire from Philadelphia who loved Stratford and wanted to leave his mark. Lovers of fine architecture rather wish he'd stayed at home. But the same can't be said of Harvard House, the original home of the man who went on to found the famous American university. It's one of Stratford's finest buildings and a particular favourite of local historian Roger Pringle.
Yes, we can see it well now, but unfortunately the scaffolding up at the moment is masking that lovely ornate timber work, because the house was built by a rich butcher in the 1590s, and he obviously employed some very good craftsmen because all those beams are beautifully carved. However, we've got the Garrick Inn next door, another Elizabethan building, and next door to that, the Tudor house, which also has quite ornate panelling. And the three of those buildings together, I think, are a lovely Elizabethan grouping. On the corner over there, we've got the Midland Bank. Now, that was built in the 1880s at the height of the Victorian period. And the bank obviously went to great trouble in creating a building with beautiful detailing on it. You can't get away from Shakespeare in Stratford, as you realize, and in fact, there in the porch, out of mosaic, surrounded with gold mosaic work, is the bard, sitting smiling down as people go in and out to get their overdrafts. And on the side of the building, there are scenes from his plays in brick and terracotta. It's a grand example of late Victorian Gothic architecture, and one that John Betjeman would have loved, I think. And then when we move to the third corner here in the centre of Stratford, we got an 18th century building of considerable elegance, put up in the 1760s as the new town hall. And unusually for the town, it's built in Cotswold stone. And in the niche on the wall there is Shakespeare again, a statue presented by the great actor David Garrick, who opened that building in 1769. I suppose Stratford has always been a fairly prosperous trading and marketing centre, right since early medieval days. And there are in the town lavish merchants' houses, some of which we've seen, of all periods, reflecting the prosperous side to the town's affairs. But it's perfectly true to say that there were times when Stratford suffered economic decline, particularly when there was agricultural depression around. On the other hand, the coming of the interest in Shakespeare and its development as a tourist centre in the 19th century helped, I think, to offset any kind of economic misfortune that affected the community as a whole.
And the buildings have been beautifully restored and maintained ever since, even if a little piracy has taken place. The original pillared entrance to the Shakespeare Hotel has somehow marched round the corner to Marks and Spencer in Bridge Street. But then commerce always had its perks. Part of the town's charm are lots of little alleyways tucked away off the main streets, which once housed the poor of Victorian Stratford. They're long gone, but in their place, thriving little concerns like the Arms and Armoury Museum. Now this is the place where all self-respecting knights come to be kitted out. Joking aside, you can actually have a suit of armour made to measure here, or buy Auntie that cannon she's always wanted. It's not only a museum, it's a shop, and some of the antique pieces are for sale, as well as modern replicas which are made in the workshops here. But most people just come to look at the 600 years of military and civilian weapons on show. There are a few special extras too, as one of the curators, Jeff Colwell, showed me.
This is a perfect scale model.
Isn't it gorgeous as well?
Yes, it was made, it's on the horse itself is actually bronze, and the metalwork is perfect in every detail.
How old is it?
It's French, made during the early 1800s.
It's smashing. And some of the other pieces that we found here that I couldn't resist, and I don't normally like weapons very much, but this sword in particular, the gold one, although they're both lovely, the gold one I thought is particularly fine.
Well, this was presented to Captain Alexander Reed for his part in the Mysore Wars. It's a solid gold hilt presented by the City of London, and it's hallmarked for 1796.
Is it heavy to carry?
Well, fairly heavy, but it is essentially a dress sword. It could be used for fighting, but normally one wouldn't use this type of weapon.
You'd keep it for best?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And this one beside it?
Yes. Well, this was made for Guy Thompson of Stratford-upon-Avon of this town. It's essentially a 1796 pattern cavalry trooper's sabre.
That's because the shape of it, because it's used to lop people's heads off, is it?
Well, it is essentially a horseman's weapon and designed for hacking and slashing.
Oh, goodness. Has it been in use, this one?
Well, we don't know for sure, but there's always a possibility.
Talking about gruesome things, this caught my eye. Now, this is particularly ugly, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well,
what exactly does it do? Because it has a number of uses.
Well, it's a French pistol and a Pachet pistol, and you've got a revolver with folding trigger. You have a small dagger here, and you've also got, as a final resort, a knocker-duster, which forms part of the grip as well.
And who would use that sort of a weapon?
Well, it's essentially a gentleman's weapon. I use gentleman in small brackets, but mainly for personal protection. I think more for show rather than for actual use.
But most of the weapons here certainly couldn't be concealed about your person. The exhibits were once part of a private collection. It took almost a lifetime to put together, but the owner, Robin Wigington, decided some of the pieces were so rare they shouldn't be locked away, but put where people could see and enjoy them.
Now, what do you think of that?
It's a knife.
It's really probably an early secret agent's weapon, in as much as it's a conventional knife when held so, but should you be attacked while you're having your lunch, heaven preserve you, you merely turn it round, cock the weapon, and fire it at your enemy.
Fascinating.
Yes, those are quite unique in as much as they're German and almost certainly made in Nuremberg.
And from the weapons of war and destruction to a place altogether more gentle and serene. I'm sitting in the hottest, most exotic spot in town, and it's full of exquisitely beautiful creatures, butterflies. This is the world's largest butterfly farm. It's a lush, man-made jungle full of tropical plants and flowers, where the butterflies actually do fly free. And you can forget about the weather outside. No matter what, in here the temperatures are permanently in the 80s. In fact, it's a small slice of paradise. All this has been grown on the site. It's a remarkable achievement, and the brainchild of a former teacher, Gareth Ireland.
Most people are amazed by the temperatures to begin with, and they're also amazed by the fact that they can see butterflies free flying around them, because I think that the majority of people are under the impression that a butterfly farm is somewhere where you can go and look at set specimens in cabinets. They're not used to butterflies settling on them and to actually seeing them as they would be in nature. We've got some very large exotic butterflies from Southeast Asia and all different parts of the world, with some of the world's largest moths and many other common butterflies which you can see around you at the moment. Some of the butterflies which look to the average member of the public very exotic are in fact amongst the world's commonest butterflies. It isn't simply a case of making it look pretty. Everything serves its purpose. Even the pests that one would naturally get in a tropical environment, in greenhouse conditions, we control with natural pest controls, such as, for example, the little Chinese quail, which you see strutting about, which take ants and spiders, which prey on butterflies. So we can't come in here and spray all the plants to get rid of the pests that farmers have, for example.
But it is a jungle in every sense, and that everything feeds on each other. And
that's right, including the creatures. We have lizards in here which will take butterflies, but they won't disturb the balance sufficiently to depopulate it.
The butterflies have a tendency to take 40 winks on the ground, so you have to watch every step. And whatever you do, don't get lost in the undergrowth. As well as the harmless butterflies and bugs, there's a path that leads through Gareth's jungle to something much more creepy, the insect house. This, for instance, is a South American orange-kneed tarantula.
The reaction of most people is one of horror when they see these spiders, but in fact it's a fairly sociable, friendly creature and very docile, not normally very quick moving, this one. And unlike other of the larger spiders, which can move quickly and will inflict a nasty bite sometimes, this one is very, very unlikely to bite you.
So how come it's had such a bad press?
I think because it's been seen in all the movies, the James Bond movies. They always use the same species of spider because they know it to be relatively harmless. And in fact, we allow school children to handle this one. But normally, it lives in behind very thick glass over there, so that people don't have access to it. This is its party piece for the day. But we will allow the public to handle it under certain conditions. The other spiders that we do have in here are bigger and more aggressive, and under no circumstances would they be handled.
Some of the insects have excellent nightmare potential, even if they are safely behind thick glass, like these scorpions. Next door to the giant beetles and locusts, you'll find a praying mantis. It was a positive relief to get back to the bees, who are doing nothing more dangerous than making honey. Time now to leave one man's dream and catch up on another. Stratford's Vintage Car Museum was founded by Bill Meredith Owens, an ex-RAF pilot, who made it his ambition to build a collection of the finest grand touring cars of the 1920s and 30s, regardless of cost. But it wasn't easy. As more and more people became interested in vintage cars, the job of finding them became even harder. His search took him all over the world. 2 of the cars were found in India. One belonged to a prime minister, the other to a maharaja. But they were in pieces, as were most of the cars when he found them. So you can imagine it was a long and painstaking task to renovate the cars and make them look as they do today. This car is how I'd like to think of myself, classy with lots of style. It's a Rolls-Royce Phantom 10EX, a great beast of a thing, built in 1925. It's the first of its kind, and for that reason it didn't leave the country. Rolls-Royce kept it here and actually used it to ferry VIPs around in. Lawrence of Arabia was one of them. The car disappeared in 1931, and when Bill Meredith Owens found it, it was in a very sorry state indeed in a used car lot in Meriden. But as you can see, it's been beautifully restored and is now in perfect working order, which is more than I can say for my friend George. No matter what, it's hard to escape William Shakespeare in Stratford. This is his birthplace in Henley Street, but just for the moment, we'll pass him by. Elsewhere, a little bit of sunshine goes a long way, for young and old. Just as the whole of Stratford's commerce and industry was once built around the river, so the town's biggest source of income today, its tourist trade, also tends to gather here when the sun shines. I'm going to explore one of the promised delights of Stratford, a trip up the river with boatman Jack Clifford.
Hey, Jack.
Hello.
Where are you taking me?
Oh, we're going downstream, down as far as the Holy Trinity Church, passing the theatre on the right-hand side. And we're going to turn down there.
I'll plunk up here for me.
That's right. Yes, see where you're going.
It's a smashing boat.
Yes, very nice, very old. 1960 was built.
Has your family had it as long as that?
Yes, we have. In fact, we had it made. My uncle used to go to Gloucester, where it was made, every weekend on his push bike to see how progress was being made. Of course, it was steam those days, and it's been on to petrol paraffin and now on to diesel, you know.
How long have boats like this been running on the river? Because at one time it was just industrial craft, wasn't it?
That's right, yes, it started just before the turn of the century. My grandfather started, one of the first to start, with a boat called the George Washington. And then, as I say, things went fairly well, so he had this boat built to follow on.
I didn't think you could go that far downriver in those days.
Well, that's right. No, we had to turn at the church, where we're going to, in fact, turn today. There is a lock there where you can now negotiate right through locks down as far as the sea, but it's only recently been opened. In those days, it was just a matter of the short stretch of river, as I say, from here and a few miles upstream.
So when were the locks actually built?
Well, the locks were built in the 17th century, when it was navigable, 17th, 18th century, but they fell into disrepair and just, it was actually filled in and a sluice gate put there at one stage, and then the Upper Avon opened the river and made the lock in exactly the same place it used to be.
Because this river actually runs into a canal at one point, doesn't it?
The canal joins the river here at Stratford, yes, it comes up from Birmingham. But there used to be, of course, a lot of activity then from the canal as well, and the boats that came up used to unload in the basin, the canal basin.
That's at the Bancroft Gardens
That's
now.
right, by the Bancroft Gardens.
There must have been a great change, I would think, over the years then.
Well, there's been a big change recently, because, as I say, with the opening of the river and the canal, we're getting all of these narrow boats down, you know, and higher boats and what have you, you know, and it's made life quite hectic on the river to what it used to be, you know. In those days, there was just, well, there were 5 of our wooden boats, 2 of Rose's across the river, and that was virtually the only motor boats on the river then, because there was no way of them arriving, you see.
So the Edwardians would come down here on a Sunday afternoon, probably, Edwardian days, and spend the afternoon messing around on the river.
That's right, yes. Well, of course, punting was very popular then, and it's a good river for punting, you know. There's a good hard bottom to it, and I mean, it's before my time, I can't remember it, but they used to bring the old gramophones that wound up, you know, and the white kit, you know, and they used to quite enjoy life, I think, really.
smashing.
They probably still used to shout at us, as they do now as we go by with a bit of wash from.
There's all sorts of ways of crossing the river. This is just one of them. But I'm glad I'm not doing all the hard work. I'm actually saving my energy for our next port of call.
The ferry will take you into Abbey Gardens, just up the river a little from the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. And from there, you can follow a well-worn path to a place where many mums with a brood of fractious children often take refuge.
If it starts to rain, you can always come and uncover the Kings and Queens of England at the Brass Rubbing Centre. And it's true what they say, once you start, it's very hard to stop.
It's also true that it's a jolly sight harder on the hands than it seems at first glance. And wouldn't you know, as well as the Kings and Queens, he gets in here too. And after using all that elbow grease, a drink would do very nicely.
This is the best-known pub in Stratford. In fact, it has something of a reputation throughout the world. And before you say, the Black Swan, I never heard of it, come and have a look at this side of the sign. Of course, it's the Dirty Duck, Stratford's traditional theatre pub. And there's a story behind the place too. At the beginning of the century, when Sir Frank Benson ran the Shakespeare Company, they were so short of space, actors used to come down here to rehearse in a shed at the back of the pub. It was so well known that on the call sheet, they always gave the location as the Dirty Duck.
The pub might well have had another name, for it sports a splendid and ancient mulberry tree, thought to be the oldest of 4 in the town. Perhaps I should have said supports, for there are no signs anywhere of the tree's roots in the cellar directly underneath. And although it's still very much alive, the tree has had to be discreetly held up by a chain. And just a stone's throw down the road stands Stratford's most famous building.
Well, I said we'd come back to William Shakespeare, and here we are. Of course, this is what it's all about, the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, Stratford's permanent memorial to its most famous son. William Shakespeare was born here in 1564, the son of a middle-class family. And although he was reasonably intelligent as a child, who would have thought then that he'd grow into the genius he eventually became? Who hasn't heard of Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet?
And next week's Day Out visits Winchcombe in the Cotswolds, which, as Gwyn Richards discovers, is a town rich in history and full of interest. And that's at 8 o'clock next Friday evening on BBC2 for the Midlands. Well, in half an hour there's more World Snooker from Sheffield. And now on to the Pebble Mill production of Gardener's World.